Hi, everyone. We are going to continue on with our investigation of sacred sites and sacred spaces this week, but turning our attention to sites for monotheistic religions. And if you need a refresher on monotheism, I would go back and review video 1 from week 2. And we are also going to look at sacred sites that have been used by different religions, and even a sacred site that was intended from its conception to be for everyone, regardless of religious beliefs. Here is a refresher on our learning objectives. This is taken straight from Canvas here. As I've said before, these are building on the course learning objectives. Remember, we are kind of adding to our key terms, understanding how to analyze the form, the alignment, the function of different sacred spaces. So these should be familiar to you. Sorry about that. I want to speak a little bit about Jewish and early Christianity in the Roman Empire. And Christianity is one of many different religions that we see develop within the massive Roman Empire. Remember, it spans the whole, the length of the Mediterranean, going into Western Europe, West Asia. And, Rome, the state religion, is that worship of that host of different Roman gods that trace their roots to Greek gods. And by the 3rd century after the year 0, so in the 200s, there's growing dissatisfaction with the state religion of Rome. And people sought a different kind of religious practice. And Romans begin to reject the polytheism of Roman paganism in favor of monotheism. And of course, Judaism and Christianity are both monotheistic. What is the difference between Judaism and Christianity? They are closely related religions, but they have some key differences. Jews believe God made a covenant, a pact with them, and that they are the chosen people awaiting the coming of the Messiah. And Messiah means anointed one, the chosen one. Christians have already seen their Messiah come. Christians believe that was Jesus Christ, who lived around the year 0. Now, along with Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are all considered Abrahamic religions. That means they all recognize the figure of Abraham as an important religious prophet. They're also often called the 3 religions of the book, meaning that all of them have written records of God's words in the form of the Torah for Jews, the Bible for Christians, and the Quran for Muslims. And there are parts of the Bible that let me back up. I should say there are parts that the Torah is also included in the Old Testament of the Bible. So some of these texts include the same figures and the same stories. In fact, the first 5 books of the Torah are the same first 5 books of the Old Testament in the Christian Bible. So as I said, closely interconnected religions. And Judaism is a religion that is thousands of years old. And as I said, around the life of Jesus, around the year 0, we see Christianity growing in support amongst the poor of the Roman Empire. This was not a religion of the elites, but it was one of many religions that springs up in the Roman Empire that is called a mystery cult. And I know cult has a kind of negative connotation today, but think of it as a small secret society. Christianity was outlawed in the Roman Empire for different periods of time, but the idea of a mystery cult is that there's some sort of initiation rite. So for Christianity, that is baptism. And that the mystery cult promises some sort of insurance of the happiness in the afterlife. And that's, of course, a really powerful message for the poor, for the downtrodden of the Roman Empire. Now, there's not much art from the early years of Christianity. Why is that? We don't need to look too far into Christian texts to see that there is a biblical prohibition against the worship of idols. This is also why we don't see a plethora of Jewish art as well. We see that same prohibition against the creation of graven images. And as I also mentioned, too, different Roman emperors persecuted Christians actively. And so it's difficult to build monumental architecture, monumental works of art when you are being persecuted by your government. I want us to think about, for Jewish and early Christian art specifically, but I think this also is important for Islamic art as well, that art is both an expression of religious identity and of social standing. And what we see is that the style is often the same in this era. Regardless of whether the art represents the Roman pagan religion, the Jewish religion, the Christian religion, there's a lot of similarities in style, which means in form. And so the differences we can find most clear in the subject matters. We're looking at a computer reconstruction of an important temple, the Temple of Herod, that was destroyed in the year 70 after the year 0, so in the Common Era. This is a more inclusive abbreviation than AD that we sometimes can see. But the Temple of Herod was the closest equivalent to, for example, the Christian St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican in Rome. Typically, Jewish communities were much smaller. They were stretched around the world, and they often built on a much smaller scale. The Temple of Herod is one exception, but it was destroyed by the Roman army in 70, and so it's just kind of it takes on an almost mythic quality, a kind of a visionary ideal. What happens most of the time is that Jewish architecture takes on the local styles, the local forms, and it responds to the needs of the local minority Jewish community. And we're looking here at the synagogue. So that is, a synagogue is the place where Jews assemble to worship. And this synagogue is in a home. It's tucked away in a private residence in the ancient city of Dura Europos that is in present-day Syria. Dura Europos was part of the Roman Empire, and it's a small city that sat on the Euphrates River in ancient Mesopotamia. And this town illustrates the very cosmopolitan character of Roman frontier society, because we see this Jewish house synagogue. We also have a Christian house church from Dura Europos. There are temples dedicated to Roman gods, and there are also temples dedicated to Persian gods. And so very diverse, very multicultural. I also should say too, Syria we might associate that place today with the ongoing brutal civil war. Dura Europos has been, the ancient sites there and excavations and studies to understand more about this Roman city have come under threat. It's not a safe place for people to travel, and so we actually don't really know the fate of something like the House Synagogue, but we can. Reports do indicate that a lot of what we're looking at has been destroyed in the past years. All right. So the house synagogue itself really is a kind of basic rectangular room, and we see this little niche here built into the one wall. This niche becomes a standard part of synagogue architecture, and this niche still today in synagogues is where the Torah scrolls are kept. And so the most important sacred books of Judaism, typically there's one big copy that's on a long rolled up scroll kept in synagogues in these niches. And then all around it on the walls, we have these really elaborate wall paintings. And here I just got done telling you that there's not a lot of art that survives, and that there's a lot of Jewish and Christian art takes the second commandment very seriously, that you will not have any graven images. But yet, what do we see? We have all these wall paintings full of figures from the Torah, people like Isaac, Jacob, Moses, and we see them as people. So what's going on here? Why do we have these narrative stories on the wall? And it might be a way to help people learn about Judaism, that help learn the important stories of the religion. And while Judaism becomes an entirely iconic religion, that means not using any images of figures, what this shows us is that in the early era of Jewish art, there are plenty of images of figures, including here this figure of Moses at the well, this large figure who is giving water to the 12 tribes of Israel. And we can see them kind of huddled around Moses here in their tent, the large menorah in the background. There's also a house church that has been found in Dura Europos. And what's so significant here, I mean, in 240 CE, this is in the very early years of Christianity, this is the only church to survive from the period before Christianity was legalized. It wasn't legalized until 313 as a religion. And as I said, this is such an important artifact for us, but its survival has been shaky during the ongoing civil war in Syria. Okay, I'm going to stop the video here. The next video, we're going to start with a place that might look familiar to some of you. This is St. Peter's. This is really one of the most important churches in world Christendom. But before this building was constructed, I'm all over the place. Before this building was constructed, it looked like this. And so we're going to start with this earlier Old St. Peter's in the next video.